So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Neil.
Thank you very much, Emily. I'd like to welcome everybody as well. Today we're going to actually talk about something that's been a key part of our strategy as we talk to enterprises for a number of years now. We've never really extracted all the relevant information into one presentation like our marketing group has done for this. So we find this we think this for people who are facing some centralization issues, we think this is going to be very, very helpful for you. The concepts even, I think, carry through in some cases to other solutions that you're looking to face those same challenges with. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. When we look at our enterprise customers, and we have a lot of them, we've spent a lot of years with some of them, and we get new ones every month. So we find whether it's a smaller customer with 100 employees or a global enterprise, they have some things in common. And anybody with multiple locations, basically, faces very similar challenges. One of them is they have just about everything in the enterprises, and it's not the same versions or the same manufacturer's brands, even from location to location to location. So they're supporting kind of everything. The larger the enterprise, the more likely they are to have just about everything in the mix. And it's not that they're high-tech connoisseurs. They don't have all these different things because they're trying them out. It's not about making the enterprise exciting. It's function. Some of it comes from how they grow. They've grown organically. They've merged companies together. They've done acquisitions. And so they tend to bring all these solutions into their enterprise, and now they're kind of stuck with them in this big giant pile, and now they have to sort it out. And the sorting out is for a number of reasons. Financial, of course, to lower the cost of maintaining things. Productivity, to make sure that every good thing they've discovered, gets out to all the employees. And as a result, they have a very complicated environment. I sit in meetings with some of these larger customers, and I mean the challenges they face are stunning, and I'm guessing that's you in a lot of cases. So we can't solve all those problems for you, but we can help you navigate through the unified communications maze, which is just a part, I know, of what you're doing. But we'll go ahead and kind of talk about what we've learned from all the enterprise deployments we've done. And of course, we don't consider ourselves the end-all experts. So we like to go to outside sources and read a lot of information about what's going on. And we're going to reference one of those here, which is the IDG Enterprise Source Survey they did earlier this year, where they went out to a little over 1,000 CIOs and asked them a lot of questions about unified communications, collaboration, consolidation, what's going on in their enterprises. And one of the ones, one of the responses that came back was, if you're looking at doing the cloud, what does that mean to you? Are you really looking at taking everything out into the public cloud? Are you looking at keeping everything inside your firewalls, kind of a private cloud? And 25% of them said, we're actually favoring a hybrid approach. We're going to look point by point at solutions, and the ones where financially and from a productivity point of view it makes sense to move them to the cloud, we'll do that, but some of our systems will remain within our control. So that hybrid cloud was a very popular approach. 61% of them said they understand they need to go down that road to UC because there's productivity gains to be had. And in today's economy, certainly productivity is a key piece in keeping your business afloat. When the markets get tough, doing more with less is one of those things everyone likes to focus on. And 61% of them also noticed that, within this area of what we have within our enterprise, I can't live with the things we have today completely. I have to have some new systems, some upgrading of systems. Within the next 3 years, we're going to look at spending some money, basically doing some of these upgrades. And as they looked at unified communications and collaboration solutions, they were more likely to start from the telephony side than the data or email side, about 2 to 1. And I think the reason for this is probably if you look at the age of systems, an enterprise right now is much more likely to have old telephony equipment than they are to have old data equipment. And it just has to do with how technology has changed and what's come out in the last couple of years. So from the UCC implementation piece, starting on the telephony side is good news for us because that means we can be involved in helping and providing these solutions. The obstacles, of course, are what they always are to almost everything, cost primarily. Now, cost is a couple of factors. It's certainly, if I have to replace things, there's upfront capital money I have to talk to. But there's also down the road money I have to talk to. There's disruption of business that can be a cost. And there's gaining the expertise within my environment to control these new kinds of solutions. If you go out on the market today and you have a skill set where you really understand unified communications, meaning you understand the telephony side and how it works, and the data side and how it works, and networks and routers, that's a very good skill set to take to the market, because people are looking for that. There's just not enough of it in most enterprises. And that's one of the main challenges that people face, is they can look at unified communications and understand the value, but it's just not a simple thing to start deploying it. And obviously, the larger the enterprise, the more the locations, the more diverse the product set, the more complex it is. So when people come to you and talk to you, they kind of come with two approaches. One is the rip and replace approach, which is very easy to understand and very expensive to implement. And these people will say, just take out all that old stuff that doesn't work, buy all the new stuff from us, we'll tie it all together for you, because you're getting it from one source, it's bound to work, and here's the bill for it. And the bill's kind of shocking. Most people look at, well, there's a lot of things I don't need to replace, and there's things I need to replace now and other things that can last another 5 years. So they tend to look more at the build-a-bridge method, where they take a point solution, they say, here's a problem I need to solve. What do I need to solve it? What pieces can I continue to use? What pieces can I upgrade? What pieces do I need to replace? And what pieces do I need to buy? And that build-a-bridge method, it's much more complex. But at the same time, it tends to not only cost less, but it tends to give the customer a better set of solutions. They end up getting best of breed in those areas instead of just sort of an average product suite. And obviously, the key to that building a bridge is interoperability. And we've always talked about interoperability. It's very nice to see that the whole world, in terms of unified communications, is now seeing what we've always seen, which is if you build a product that can connect to everything out in the enterprise, the value of that product will be very, very high. And that's what we find with the CXE product. So, we do like to bother you a little bit during these presentations. We're not going to ask you to have to sit forward and take your phone off mute or anything, but we would like to ask you some questions. And Emily will start this part.
Great. Thank you, Neil. So our first polling question, we're curious what your UC deployment strategy is. Is it a private cloud, a hybrid environment, or are you planning to go fully to the cloud, or are you still evaluating? So we'll go ahead and wait a few more seconds and get everyone's votes in. And just to share the results with you, Neil, 12% said private cloud, 36% were hybrid, 2% plan for a full UC to the cloud, and then 50% are still evaluating.
And those are very interesting numbers. And you notice they sort of match that poll that we looked at as well. The concept of the cloud is certainly appealing. The concept of, for a flat price, somebody will take all your problems away. And as people move down and start evaluating the full public cloud, they run into problems almost immediately with what they need in their enterprise in terms of support, in terms of privacy of business practice. There's a lot of things like that. So the fact that 50% are still evaluating is hardly surprising, because at the rate that the cloud solutions are growing out there, it's kind of too early to actually make big sweeping decisions. So like I say, that build a bridge lets you start with the problems you have to solve today and take an approach that basically lets you guarantee you get a best-of-breed solution, and the solutions you purchase, you need to make sure have that interoperability so that at least that piece of the solution that you put in place will last you through this entire migration, whichever way you decide to go. We like our platform for this kind of approach. We have that interoperability, and we have a ton of applications that run on this one single platform. So you can take a single server call express at 4 ports and deploy our entire solution set. And that makes us very unique. No one else can deploy all of these things on one single server. And that's one admin client, and that's one client for the users. I mean, it's not only simplistic in terms of looking at it in a Visio diagram, but it's easy to install and maintain. And all these applications basically are things that we've developed over the years on the CXE platform. And because we're the largest provider of these kind of solutions that's not affiliated with a particular PBX manufacturer, we believe in interoperability to the point where we think our solutions should fit into your environment, requiring no changes at all. We don't want to come to you with a list of what you have to upgrade in order to take advantage of the solutions we have. So with our interoperability features, we feel we have that. With our architecture, which we're going to look at a bit in this, we believe no matter what your organization looks like, from a single site to a fully centralized to a fully distributed model. We're going to be able to configure our product to match your choice. There's a lot of decisions you have to make about centralization that are really based on very important pieces within your industry, having to do with how you want to control your environment, and we don't want to dictate that. We simply want to be able to match that. So that's what we're going to look in this presentation. As you approach that centralization, how are we going to be able to fit into that story for you? If you look at what's important in centralization, most of this is cost-driven. I mean, in terms of, the goal is to lower operating costs. But along the way, there's a lot of other considerations. One of them is definitely resiliency. If I'm going to implement a new architecture in today's world, let's see what we can do in the way of high availability, disaster recovery, maybe virtualization. Those are important pieces in our story. And from our point of view, we're able to do all of that. Scalability becomes important. If you have 10 sites and they each have a 20-port voicemail, you could put anything in. Almost anybody would do 20 ports for you. Now you consolidate and all of a sudden you have 200 ports and you've narrowed the market down. We support up to 500 ports. So far, that's supported all the customers we need. Although we have some that are pushing up close to that, we're pretty comfortable that our solution will be scalable enough for just about any kind of centralization people look at. Support for multiple integrations to different types of phone systems is critical, because very few enterprises with multiple sites are lucky enough to have an environment where they have all the same phone system. That might be a goal, but somewhere along the line they acquired some other company, they did a merger, and all of a sudden they have all these different types of phone systems. And the good thing about our platform is we'll connect all of those. That's not even a challenge for us. Survivability is very important. As we look at multiple sites and look at architecture, there's a number of ways to tie all those sites together. One of the things to consider is in the event of a data network outage, which unfortunately, as we all know, happened. We had a kind of an excellent example over the weekend or earlier in the week with what went on the East Coast that not only took out everybody's power, but all up and down the seaboard, data circuits were down, and that has a major implication on how businesses run. And we'll look at a couple of different ways to support remote sites, because we have a good mix of products there. The ability to emulate other user interfaces as you consolidate. If you have half your people on old maybe Serenade or ARIA systems, some of them are on a Meridian Mail, some of them might be on an Intuity, and as you start rolling them together, you have a choice. You can make everyone learn a new interface, and some people take that choice, considering long-term support issues. They like that, to have one interface. But on our product, you can also give those users the interface they already know on a user-by-user basis, which greatly impacts how much disruption to your business happens as you move over to the new system. So that's one of the things that we have in our system. And then the ability to support multiple time zones and different dialing plans, multilingual, all those come into effect when you sit down that first time in front of your whiteboard and draw out what you have and scratch your head and try and figure out what you want to end up with. So on the telephony side, we're in pretty good shape there. We integrate to everything that's out there. At least I don't know of anything we don't integrate with. We have multiple types of integrations. We're the last really big vendor left that still builds dedicated integrations. All of our competition, they integrate to their own systems. They're associated with a PBX manufacturer. And for everything else, they just use a media gateway. The media gateway is kind of something that connects to the older systems and converts that into an IP integration. And we support that because there are times when that's helpful. But we also still build custom integrations to all the software using all the traditional methods. So if a switch supports a QSIG integration, we'll have that. If they support station set emulation, we'll have that. All the native integrations. And that gives us some big advantages, particularly when you look at what software levels you have on your telephony products. You're bound to have a lot of them out there that are old, and the cost to upgrade them or replace them to support a true IP environment can be a very major part of the cost of centralization. And we're going to show you ways you can get around that cost. So let's look at private cloud centralization first. Now, the definition of private cloud centralization is actually pretty simple. You can have as many sites as you want. They're inside your network. Now, that's not a single building we're talking about. That's a single controlled network like an MPLS deployment or something along those lines. In other words, as much network connectivity as you're using outside your building, all the applications live inside your building. So you've got your own groupware system, you've got your own telephony systems, voicemail systems, your ERP systems. All that is internal. And you still, the drive to centralization for that is still a main piece. So what we're able to do is take the mixture of components that's available on the CX system and match what your architecture looks like. So in your main center, maybe your data center or your main site, we can go ahead and start. We'll put some call servers in. Those are our elements that connect to the phone system. Put a control server in, and now we can go and look at your sites one by one and choose the best kind of connectivity. And we support a lot of types. If we go down to remote site 1, that might be a pretty important site. That might be where your accounting department lives, or your sales department lives, and you really want them to have as much high availability as they can. So we'll go ahead and put a couple of those call server elements down at that remote site. And these are still part of the same system. This is all integrated. But now what you have with the call centers in place is a high level of survivability. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. I might have a smaller site. Maybe it's a medical clinic off of a hospital chain, where I actually don't have any IT resources working in that building at all. I really don't want to put a Windows server there if I don't have to, because I don't want to worry about upgrades and patches and all of that. So we'll use a media gateway. In our case, we use Dialogic media gateways. And what that allows you to do is have just an appliance down there, and they convert that integration into an IP integration that can come back across the network and connect to your main site. Whether you have 1 or 2 for survivability, that's the same concept. And that's how most of the other vendors that we compete with support remote sites, is with some sort of gateway. We also could have a site where we want survivability, but we're just going to put a single call server because it's a small site, but they have a little bit of capability there of doing some maintenance on servers. And then, of course, if you have a remote site that is a new version of software and supports SIP, an IP integration, you can connect that through the network back into that system that's at the main site. This architecture really spans just about every possibility for what somebody's going to want out there. And as we go through and talk about the reliability levels with each of these, you can kind of see how you're going to get to choose what architecture meets the business need at that particular site. So if you look at our architecture, basically the call servers are the elements that connect to the PBX, and they answer calls and run all the applications and play messages. And then within a system, there can be anywhere from 1 to 20 of those call servers. And they can all be centralized, or they can all be scattered all around. The system server is actually the centralized control server, and it keeps all those other call servers in line. It replicates all the data to them. It gathers all the messages. It has the single centralized message store, the database store, the administration tools, etc. And it's basically in constant contact with the call servers. So with those 2 elements, we now get to go out and talk about building connections out into your architecture. The system is very, very survivable. In other words, if I have this kind of implementation here, maybe I have 24 ports on each of those 2 call servers at one location. If one call server fails, the other keeps on working. So I will have a slight reduction in capacity, and if if half your ports is too much, it's really not much more expensive to put in 3 or 4 of those call servers, such that if one server fails, the impact on your capabilities is minimized. If the system server fails, the call servers are survivable. They'll go ahead and keep recording messages, taking calls, running all your applications. The limitation there is obviously users can't get to their messages because they're stored on the system server. And we have a way around that as well. So let's talk about why call servers are good compared to the other options. First of all, it minimizes the points of failure. What we can do now is we can have a server that actually something can go wrong with it, and while it can have an impact in terms of capacity, it doesn't take you out of business. And as soon as you put multiple call servers in, you now have some level of high availability, which means business can continue even in the event of a component failure. There's built-in fault tolerance. Those servers are able to work, do everything except retrieve messages, basically, if they can't contact the system server. And that's whether they can't contact it because it's down or if there's a network outage. So for remote sites, those call servers give you the ability, even if you lose your data network, to continue answering calls, running all your applications, automated attendance, speech interface, whatever else you have, and record messages. So from the outside caller's point of view, there's really no difference noted. And then when the system comes back up, it'll move those messages and everything will go back to normal. So that gives us the ability to deploy multiple sites in a method that isn't completely dependent on having that data connection up. And data connections are getting better and better and better. Now you notice that last one down the list there, remote site 5, if you have a direct SIP connection back to the main site, let's say, and the data network fails, unfortunately, that site will go ring no answer in terms of call processing and voicemail, because you are relying on the element that's back at the main site. So one of the considerations when we look at a direct IP integration to a remote site is what's the impact on your business if you don't have call processing and messaging for some period of time when there's a network failure. So, looking at that way of doing it, as you evaluate, have you made some choices on an active component, a gateway, or are you looking maybe at a mixed environment?
Went ahead and had everyone vote, and we had about 44% that voted for call servers, and then 56% said that a mixed environment would be best for them.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, as we look at, we've got a lot of experience with enterprises, and as we talk to people, there are just some locations that are more important than others, and it has to do with the business function in that location more than anything else. And as you start laying out how you support those environments, and everybody could build every site with full redundancy and high availability, but there's some sort of line you draw based on the value of that versus the cost of putting everything out like that. So the mixed environment, we find for almost any large customer, offers the best value ratio for them. So if you look at the real differences here between using the media gateways and the call servers, it's really a balance of two things. A call server, in our case, a call server runs on Windows Server. So it's a Windows Server install, which means you have to have some sort of methodology every now and then to patch it. You want to run a virus program on it, it's going to sit in a rack somewhere. So in a data environment, that's no challenge at all. But at a remote site, when you really don't have what you need to maintain that server, that's a little challenge. The upside is, because it's an active application, when you lose that data network connection, it keeps on working. It answers the phone. You have continuity, particularly from an outside caller's point of view. They can't even tell there's anything wrong. So the upside is much more reliable. The downside is it takes a little bit to maintain any Windows server. On the other side, the Dialogic Media Gateway, that just happens to be the brand of gateway that we use, is the exact opposite of that. If the network fails, this is simply a translator. It doesn't perform any application functionality. So if the data network fails, any calls ringing into our system will simply go ring no answer. So you lose front-end automated attendance, you lose all the call processing, you lose the ability to leave messages. Now the upside is it's an appliance. It literally, you can sit it on a shelf, bolt it into a rack, plug it in, and never touch it again. And in some locations, customers will definitely find that beneficial. So as we look at going out to engineer sites, we have this discussion with customers to make sure they understand those choices, and then we can follow their direction whichever way they want to go. One of the things about our product that's maybe the most impressive is because we have 20 call servers, you can support a lot of sites in high availability mode. So we can actually support 20 sites that have call servers on them, meaning they'll survive a network failure. If you look at our competition, the most any of our competition has is 3. Now, if you want to have sites with 2 call servers, so you have high availability and redundancy, we can give you 10 of those sites. And none of our other competitors can give you any more than 1. So we have definitely architected this product with the migration and the consolidation in mind. And we have some real advantages in any multi-site environment. So if you're looking at kind of developing a strategy with consolidation and support for remote sites, well worth your time to have a little conversation with us. So the other thing is, the centralization piece certainly makes it more likely, since you have all your basically all your eggs in one basket, that you're going to want as much redundancy as possible. So besides those architecture pieces we've also talked about, we also support secondary and tertiary system servers. So the concept here is, if my system server fails, we know how well the call servers work, but there still is that limitation. We can't get messages. So what we can do is put an active-passive pair of system servers in, and if the active one fails, the passive one takes over immediately, automatically, connects to all the call servers, and everything goes right on. You don't lose calls in process. It takes probably a minute. There'll be like a minute switchover time in there where you won't be able to, a caller trying to log in during that minute would get a message saying to call back later. But other than that, full automatic redundancy, automatic failover. And that's, once again, fairly unique in our industry to be able to offer that, and it's definitely something that people have kind of in the SLAs where they're looking at delivering functionality out to their users. Something that doesn't fail, that has automatic failover, is a key piece of a lot of people's strategy. And this is irregardless of whether you're using call servers or gateways or direct IP connections. This is just kind of a central point of the architecture. Now we take all these tools and we kind of look at what we can do. We've got 20 call servers. In this case, we're showing 10 locations with 2 each. We can support up to 500 ports, up to 40,000 users, and 20,000 of those can be unified messaging users. And a single implementation of a call server can support up to 144 ports if you're not running the advanced speech applications. But even with the advanced speech applications, a single server can support up to 96 ports. So that's not really been a limitation for us and able to match the customer's environment. I can connect those call servers to up to 10 different types of integrations. That's not saying 10 PBXs, that's saying 10 types. So you could have 8 Avaya PBXs, 6 of the older Nortel flavor of the Avaya PBXs, 5 Alcatel PBXs, 3 Mitels, 2 Astras, and 5 NECs. It's no problem for us. Basically, there's no limitation to the number of PBXs other than the limitation on port size. So our ability to match your environment today is we go further than anyone else does at all. And that being said, one of the great things is if you deploy this kind of technology, knowing that in the next 2 or 3 years you're going to have a voice over IP migration, it's great to know that these call servers can just be repurposed. You simply can go in and say, oh, I was hooked to this kind of PBX, but I'm centralized now, so I'll just add this piece here and now I'll connect it. You don't ever have to, throw anything away. And then maybe the most important piece is you can also move those call servers. If I have a completely decentralized approach today where I feel I have to put 2 call servers out at 3 or 4 sites, but later on I'm going to want a centralized one, those call servers can simply be moved from the remote location, brought into the center location, turned on, they'll resynchronize in a different manner, and you'll be back in business. So whatever we do for you today, we are going to be able to also match as you move forward. And, it's probably a good idea if you're really thinking of doing something major like this to talk to some people that have already done it. And we have a lot of references. This is just a couple that we've picked for this presentation. And these people, they'll talk to you. They'll tell you kind of how they evaluated up front, why they picked our solution, and how it went. And, most of these people will tell you it was a massive effort in planning. We were out there time after time with them, revising, changing the network diagrams, figuring out, what we had to do to make sure that that transition happened smoothly. And most of them will also tell you that it went extremely well. And all of them will tell you that now what they have is exactly what they wanted. They have a single solution, a single admin client. It's easy for the users. It's easy for the administrators. So it's one of those things, as you get closer, you may actually want to talk to some of those customers. The key to all this is our architecture. And our architecture is somewhat unique, and that just has to do with our timing as we came into the market. So we started our company back in 1982 with an open system. We just came at the right time where we never had a proprietary version of the product. And as a result, we've been adding features and improvements to this product since 1982. We have more features than anyone else by far. Even our competition will tell you, they tell their salespeople, don't get in a features war if you're selling against the CX product, because we have everything in it. But more than that, we've been able to take this architecture. We built this as a multi-application platform right from the very beginning, and with a nice interoperability layer on the bottom, which lets us connect much better than any of our competition does to whatever you have out in your environment. And then we have 2 feature set platforms. The mobile feature set, which is sort of the newest, greatest connect from the outside world piece, and we run a lot of webinars on that functionality. You can join one if you're interested in talking about those features. We have the core voice solution set, which is basically, if you're replacing a legacy system, that's the voicemail call processing automated attendant piece. And once again, been adding features to that since 1982, so that's pretty feature-rich. And then the last application platform there we call UC Business Process, and this is in recognition of the fact that no matter how much we put in the product, our customers will still ask us for stuff we don't have. They have some unique needs somewhere. They need to tie their SAP database into some sort of call flow. They have a call center that they're going to take calls out of that call center, and they need to handle them in some custom way. For that business, we have two very powerful toolkits that let us write custom applications. Our interoperability does not stop at our ability to tie to things out in the enterprise. We take it right on through to build custom things that tie to the enterprise. We also have presentations on UC Business Process, and if you kind of watch our schedule, you could join one of those. And what you'll find is a very powerful set of programming tools that let us always say yes, and then we just kind of discuss how we're going to go about deploying it. So if you look at our customers out there, you'll find there are areas that make us kind of unique in the market and very successful in the market. Certainly a mixed PBX infrastructure. With all our integrations and all our call servers, no one can touch that part of the business. We own that. The speech-based piece, we've got 15 years in putting speech applications together. And these aren't bolt-ons like they are with all our competition. This is integrated functionality within the core platform. If you're going to replace a legacy voicemail, what could be better than somebody that was out there with those same features when you bought that legacy voicemail? We have every legacy feature we know about. If you're going to migrate over time from the older TDM type interfaces to your telephony world to IP, ours is a very simple process. Literally in a user mailbox, if they move from one PBX to the other, there's a drop-down window that you just select which PBX they're connected to. They don't have to do anything. It's a very simple process because we've built this architecture knowing that there's going to be those kind of changes. Unified messaging, basically we own unifiedmessaging.com. That's how long we've been in the business. We have the most flexible architecture and happy to have those discussions. Private cloud centralization, hopefully what you've seen in this presentation, we have all the tools to make that successful for you. We can't make it easy because you have complex things you have to deal with. But as you work that whiteboard drawing out, we can be right there with you, putting the right components in place to match your business needs. And then the last piece is when you ask us for something custom, we are happy to sit down and talk about our tools and the kind of things that we can do. We have lots of customers. We have big customers. We have small customers. We have customers in every segment of business. If you were to look at these customers and actually know who they were in terms of how they use our product, you'd see a mix of single-site people with a huge system, people with systems scattered across the world, centralized in 3 separate data centers, people with 80 systems, all with a complete standalone call express system in it because that's what they wanted, standalone business units. They wanted standalone business units because they buy and sell these business units on a regular basis. So they wanted actually that separation. So every kind of implementation you can imagine is there. And if you don't see one there that's in your industry, call us. I guarantee you we have one. And now some questions, hopefully.
Yes, and hopefully this time you can hear me.
Yes, we
can.
Okay,
we do have a few questions. First question is virtualization supported on the servers, such as Vmware?
Yes. As of our current version of software, you can virtualize everything. You can do it in a couple of different ways. And our product has a status of VMware ready. In other words, we went to the VMware labs, ran it all through them, and got that stamp of approval. And everything can be virtualized. The one thing you have to be careful with is if you have an older PBX that requires cards for integrations, like station emulation cards. Cards can't go into the VMware environment. It's got nothing to do with us. It's just what VMware does. That might be another place where you use a gateway to put in instead of cards, so you could virtualize the call servers. But yes, we do full virtualization, and we're happy to have that discussion.
Okay, next question. What kind of bandwidth is required between headquarters and remote sites for call servers or DMG?
So it's a pretty easy discussion to have, and bandwidth really isn't the controlling factor usually. If you think of bandwidth, here's what happens. I call into a remote call server. I leave a message. Temporary copy of that message goes onto the call server, and then it's moved across the network to the system server. So that message is probably somewhere between 250 and 300K, which is really not very much if you look at bandwidth today. So if you take the number of users out at that site, and the average number of messages they get a day, times 2, times 300K, you pretty much have the bandwidth. You apply like a 13% busy hour formula, and you can get it right down to what you need. And I have yet to have a discussion with anybody where they didn't say, oh, that's no issue at all. Now, the second piece is the latency issue. That's why when I talked about some of those customers we looked at, they have 3 data centers around the world instead of 1, because there's some physics involved here. I have to do with the speed of light, where you can get too far away for any of this to work, whether it's an IP phone conversation or anything. You can get too far away for it to work. We're looking for very typical latency times in the 120 milliseconds one-way range, which for almost any network within the United States is not an issue. Now, when we have a customer come to us and they want to have their data center in New York and they want to support their remote offices in Singapore and Hong Kong, then we get to have a little physics lesson where we show that, if they can find a way to get the latency in place with that, we're happy to support it. But typically, that latency piece will control where those call servers can go more likely than the bandwidth piece.
Okay. Another question on remote sites. For AVST customers, do you find more using call servers at remote sites or DMGs?
So it's interesting. I think there are more call servers out there than DMGs, but we look at different sites with different requirements. We did a large utility company last year that had some very unusual requirements because some of the things that they needed to have connectivity in were like hydroelectric plants in a dam, a nuclear facility, where having a server was just not even an option. So we definitely see a lot of use of those DMGs in special cases. But if I went into an enterprise that had 10 locations and all those locations were business locations, traditional, in most cases they'll have call servers. We're happy to go either way, and we have those discussions with everybody. There's not a big difference cost-wise one way or the other. There's no difference in latency and bandwidth requirements. Well, technically a dialogic media gateway needs a little more bandwidth because it's carrying the whole conversation. But still, that's generally not the gating factor. The gating factor is how important is it that you have a high availability out at that site versus are you comfortable having a server out there?
Okay. The last question is a little bit more general. Which types of UC technologies do you see first moving to the cloud?
I think the first movements came before the cloud name was popular again. I think if you look at, there's some point applications where software as a service started showing up. We use one here that we talk about a lot, which is Salesforce.com. Initially, we had an in-house system, our own servers and everything else, and it just became obvious that it was much better financially to move that into the cloud, where we controlled our costs and we had the maintenance taken care of, etc. So I think those kind of support applications moved out even before the cloud became popular. As we look at it now, the most popular thing in terms of our discussions with customers is email. It started a couple of years ago with Gmail becoming very popular. We needed to make sure we could integrate with Gmail when it was out in the cloud, which we can, no problem. And then it's growing now with Office 365. In the medium and smaller sized markets, they're making those same kind of discoveries that maybe it's a little cheaper to do that than to have an Exchange server on site and maintain. Now, the good news there is those things moving to the cloud directly involve us, and our ability to support them, once again, makes our product a much more competitive choice. The latest one that I think is kind of growing now is the actual telephony moving to the cloud. The hosted telephony services, you find people out there kind of dancing around how that works and how we set that up so it works well, and we're involved in quite a few discussions on that as well, because once again, the connectivity of our product is such that we can offer a lot of value in that market. But I'd say support services for typical customer applications went first. Voicemail is the piece that's doing the most activity now, and we're starting to see the telephony piece as well.
Okay, great. We just had one more question, and that's somebody asking if we can email the presentation. And yes, for everyone, you will be emailed a copy of the presentation after the webinar later today, so go ahead and check for that. And we'd like to, as always, thank everyone for joining us for this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Neil, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I always like to tell the people that join us that we really appreciate you taking the time to do that. This is what's on my calendar for today. You had to carve special room out to do this. I know that's hard. I know you get offered all kinds of things, and I appreciate you taking the time to come. And I hope the value was there. I hope you got enough out of this that you think the time was well spent. And if you didn't, let us know. Tell us what other things you'd like to see us discussed. Or if you did, let us know too, because our marketing people work really hard on these. They do a really, really good job. And I'm sure they'd enjoy hearing that you think they did a good job too. Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great day.